And you know what? It's something that candidates should learn as well, because as we're doing so many more, obviously everyone's doing Zoom interviews these days. Basic stuff is going to have an impact subliminally how well you're doing. Like if your audio is bad, that's going to impact how people feel about you. If someone's straining to hear, for instance, what you're saying because you've got bad audio, then actually that's going to impact your candidacy for a job. A lot of people may not be aware of that. So yeah, lots of things we need to do. So folks, we might do an AV special. How do you actually up your AV game 2025? Because it still seems to be the case that some people don't know the basics, do they, Sam?
No, apparently not.
No, but folks, I welcome everybody. I welcome everybody to Brain Food Live on air, bringing it to you, no fail. It's episode 279. I don't even know where I've got the numbering system right. It might be episode 280. I might have duped 279. But we're bringing it to you every Friday. And we're back to normal programming, even though I am still not at home. I think it's week 5. I've been rolling around. I've lost my underwear. I've got one sock left. I've had to buy a new pair of shoes. You know what I mean? The only item of clothing I've still got consistently all the way through is actually this white shirt, because I don't actually wear it. I only wear it for TV. Only wear it for this. Yeah. Anyway, great to see everybody here, and we're here to talk about a really important topic: diversifying your talent pipeline with employee referrals. Now I've got the wonderful Sam Davies with us here today as the co-host. You've been press ganged in, Sam, so welcome to it. Thanks for doing it. In fact, why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you? What is you do, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me. So I'm Sam. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Relinks. We are an employee referral and employer brand advocacy platform. But one of the things that I've really been focusing on recently with the business is exactly what we're going to be talking about today, which is how you can actually use referrals in a positive way to support diversity. And there are some different angles that you can go about, which we're going to delve in today. So very much looking forward to the session.
Yeah, brilliant to have you, Sam. And Realink's obviously one of the leading players, leading innovators in this space. So do check them out. Sam, that is your cue to share a cheeky link into the chat stream. So why don't you go ahead and do that? And yeah, we'll get on with it. We haven't actually done any sound checks, so we might need to repeat all that. So. Folks, can you hear us? And let us know in the chat whether the audio is okay, folks. We should be live streaming this as well. So we're doing this on Crowdcast #1, but we're also doing this, I think, on multiple LinkedIn. So I'm blasting this out on my LinkedIn. I do believe, Sam, you're doing the same. And there's a bunch of other people that are broadcasting with us. If you can hear and see me and Sam, okay, let us know in the comment thread that we're okay to go. It seems that I'm seeing it that I'm on, so I should be okay. Okay, cool. We can get on with it. Right. Did you read the newsletter, Sam? You probably didn't, did you? But did we go through this or not? Did you read the newsletter from last week?
I didn't. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You know what? It's the first time someone's actually said that, even though I know most people often don't. We can skip this. This gives us the opportunity to skip it because everyone should have read the newsletter anyway, and we don't need to rehash. What we do need to do, though, is have a little look at this poll I did on this topic about a week or so ago in prep for this conversation. So this was quite an interesting poll. I'm going to try and share it on screen, actually. Let me just fire this up. Am I here? Give me 1 sec. So I asked the audience, my LinkedIn audience, what was the, what do you use referrals, and if so, why not? What's the story on this? Share screen real quick on this, and I'll show you what the results are, because they were interesting, and we had some really interesting commentary as well, which is worth our view. So we're going to just do this. Oh, hello. I love it when apps just spring new things on you without sort of knowing. Does everyone see my screen okay? It should say employee referrals, employee referral program. Are they anti-diversity? Can you all see that screen, folks? Yeah? Yes or no?
It's coming through, Hung, yeah.
Yeah, people see it. Perfect. Okay, so I just asked this question only a week ago, and we have 547 votes on this. and the distribution of this. Question is, what is your position on referrals and diversity? Do you think referrals are, and the questions are, biased, don't use? We had only 3%. So that's a very low number of people that thought that referrals were inherently bad, and you couldn't use them in any circumstance. That's, I thought, very promising. The highest vote, which I thought again was very promising, was that bias, employee referrals were biased. However, you can use with care. So in other words, we understand there's a risk when you're asking your employees to refer people, because obviously you've delegated that choice to another person who may not have been trained, may not be have the same kind of alignment in terms of values, etc. But they're going to just involve someone else into the company. So this bias might ensue, but can be used with care. 67%. Then we had another group saying, okay, it's not biased, also use at will. So these are the more libertarian types. So 23% said, yeah, you know what, just charge ahead. And then we had 7% had no policy on it. So from your view, Sam, what are your thoughts on that distribution of votes? Can you give some commentary on that?
Yeah. So I did a bit of analysis, actually looking at some of our clients and seeing the impact on diversity, which I think will help to add a bit of color to those results. I think can be biased, handle with care is a really good option that you had on there, and something that we see a lot of clients do. And I'll just give you one example of this, and then I'll quickly go into the data. So a lot of our clients using our system will add some qualification to a referral. So, for example, when I put you forward for a role, Hung, and I will then be asked the nature of my relationship with you. So, one of the questions might be, have I worked with Hung? Can I comment on Hung's work, for example? Have we worked together for 2 years? Now, when you add those qualification questions, you can make a distinction when it comes to referrals between a recommendation and just an introduction, right? So you split it into 2 parts. For the clients that add those qualification questions and only really define a referral as a recommendation, like where you've previously worked with somebody and you're making that recommendation on the basis of that, you really move away from, I guess, one of the big issues that historically plagued referrals, which is, I'm going to put forward my cousin because my cousin's looking for a job, or actually my friend's son needs some work experience, I'm going to put them forward, for example. So it moves it away from this sort of friends and family type of referral, and it moves it more towards qualified referrals. And when you do that, and when we were looking at the data, actually, it wasn't having a negative impact on diversity. It was often having a more positive impact on diverse applications coming through the other channels that they were doing. So I think the point around handle with care is an important one. And I think having some qualifications around what a referral means is a really, really good way to do that and ensure that you're seeing positive and fair diversity coming through. Does that make sense?
It does, but it doesn't make sense because it doesn't follow, Sam. So you've split it. I love this. So folks, this is actually a very important distinction. A referral is not necessarily an endorsement, right? Because that if you do that, basically you're not going to get any referrals in, because you're laying all of the pressure on the referee, when in fact the referee may not be qualified or may not know the person deeply enough to really bang the table for them. I may have met somebody sort of in a bar, and then I know they're a qualified candidate in this field, but can I endorse them? No, I can't. But I can, say, hey, listen, why don't you apply? There's no reason why that shouldn't be considered to be a referral, but it's an introduction, not a recommendation, which ultimately means the responsibility to do all the QA is rightly with the recruitment team and the hiring managers on the way down. So that distinction is important to trigger more outcomes. I don't see how that makes it less diverse, though, because I may be hanging around bars where I've got a very undiverse audience. So
let me follow on from that, right? So where you've got an organization that maybe doesn't have as much diversity, right? So they're struggling as an organization with diversity generally, right? So let's go with that as a case in point, as one of the conversations that I had last week, where they were getting referrals from friends and family, right? Because that has historically what's happened. They were finding, the analysis on that was those referrals weren't particularly diverse. It was more of the same. When they were seeing referrals being made where it was like, I've worked with this person previously, and the nature of what a referral is, a recommendation is, had been shifted, they then saw that actually those referrals were more diverse than the friends and family type of referrals. So that's the point that I'm trying to make here, that moving the needle on what a recommendation is and making it clear that it's not just because you're cousins with somebody is a really important distinction to make. And when you start doing that, you start encouraging more diverse referrals. And then the introduction piece, that's just broad as can be, as you say, right? That's going wide. And it is an important distinction. But I think having some qualification questions about what you are looking for from a referral standpoint and what counts as a referral helps to move it in the right direction.
Yeah, that it does actually loop it back very well. So you're saying that if the endorsements do tend to be non-diverse, right? And by the way, what we're talking about diversity here is basically how what their distance is from you demographically. You're simply going to hang around with people that you are more similar to. That's just the general case. Particularly, I'm thinking on age strata as well. Like because we go through from schooling, we start separating out into age ranges. And we end up kind of having these age cohorts where, you know what, are you able to really recommend someone or even introduce someone who is a generation younger or older than you? Most of us probably can't. Recruiters are different, obviously, because we've got a very large network. But you can imagine sort of people being in quite strong age cohorts for a long period. And of course, then you've got, identity cohorts as well. You're going to know a bunch of people that maybe are more similar to you and so forth. Particularly if you're of the majority identity. Here, I'm thinking about ethnicity, for instance. If you're in an ethnic majority in a country that particularly isn't ethnically diverse, you can't be expected to know a lot of people that are ethnic minorities. This is the numbers are not going to be there. So yeah, Sam, you want to come in before I say something wrong? So go ahead.
No. I agree with everything you're saying. I think there's a comment that's been put in here around the sort of diversity of your workforce, and I think it ties with a lot of what you're saying as well, Hung, which probably leads me to the second point I was going to make around handle with care. And it's something obviously about as a case study. Where you are an organization that really struggles in particular areas of your business with diversity, it requires a more proactive approach. So what I'm giving is high level, sort of redefine what a referral means, encourage the right sort of referrals. That's a high level point. But if you start thinking about the diversity that you have within and you start running campaigns with, for example, employee resource groups, affinity groups, diversity groups, depending on your terminology, then you can actually start to have a really positive impact on it. Should I chat about that case study now, or do we want to save it for later? What's your thoughts, Hung? You're muted. I can't hear you.
Sorry, mate. I mean, I never mute myself. I mean, why should I ever throttle my own voice? But there was like some horrendous helicopter noise outside this property here, and I had to kill it. Don't go into this case study yet, because we'll talk about it in a bit. I just want to address a few comments that are coming through on LinkedIn, which on my LinkedIn, which is quite interesting. So Dorothy, thank you for your commentary there, Dorothy. She's mentioned that I read research showing that referral schemes favored white men. Is that true? Now, is just broad strokes? Where would Dorothy have got that information? And are you aware of that claim? And what would you say against it?
Fail with white men, did she say? Sorry.
No. The comment is it's favoring white men. So in other words, referral schemes generate more white male candidates than any other.
I think it depends on it all comes down to, firstly, the way in which you use referrals and your program. So I don't see that across our clients when it's used strategically. I think it depends about like the diversity of your workforce, and if you are struggling with diversity generally, and you're in a particular industry or a particular company where your employee population is predominantly filled with white males, then it can be a problem. Where you have a more diverse workforce, where you essentially tap into that diversity and you encourage referrals within that diversity, then it can actually start to have a really positive impact. I'm going to save that for later. The other thing I wanted to touch on here that I think is a really, really important point when you're talking about referrals I think there is a growing convergence between advocacy and referrals. And if you really want to combat diversity, you need to link content to jobs. So what do I mean by that? Okay, so an organization is struggling to attract people from diverse backgrounds. Getting everybody in the company just to share job descriptions, even if you're saying we're a diverse and inclusive place to work, the data suggests that isn't nearly as persuasive as sharing content around what it's like to be diverse within that organization and linking that to jobs. So when you bring advocacy referrals together, when you combine content with jobs and you encourage your employee population to share that, as long as it's promoting, so for example, what it's like to be a female engineer or a female software engineer, you're far more likely, and the data backs this up, far more likely to get diverse applications off the back of that. So looking at the two things together, I think, is a really important path if you want more diversity.
Yeah, really good point. So it's not just about recommendations, it's also combining the stories, promoting the stories, because the truth is we are, and this actually moves a little bit away from referrals per se, we're just more in tune to, we react to basically people who look like us on screen. I mean, we know that on TV, right? So there's a big difference in terms of how, I mean, I'm a Chinese person. I'll use myself as an example. It's only been very recently, since we've seen basically people that look like me on TV. 10, 15 years or so ago, you wouldn't see a Chinese looking person doing anything on a screen that wasn't like a stereotypically Chinese thing. The guy would be like some sort of triad on some cheapo sort of a crime flick, or you know what I mean? He'd be running a takeaway. Yeah. Like that was the two jobs that were possibly available for a Chinese person. And you'd have to play an ethnic role, and not just be a dude, right? And that actually affects a lot of people, because your imagination means you never think of those other things that you might be doing. So there's been a big breakthrough here for people who look like me. But again, every ethnicity's had that experience. If you go back to black people. I remember, was it Floella Benjamin hit 75 years old recently, I think, something like that. She hit a big anniversary. She was the first non-white person I saw on TV. And that was like a remarkable thing. It was like, wow, what is this? I was 5 years old. I couldn't believe it. But there she was doing something that, she wasn't doing a black role. She was just a person that happened to be black being on TV. And that was a huge breakthrough moment. So we need to see that visibility, because it basically makes people feel more welcome. And if you're trying to recruit the best people, then should you not make more people more welcome?
Very quick point on that. I'm seeing a number of organizations now move. So historically, you've had like people in charge of employer brand advocacy maybe sit here, and then you've had somebody else in charge of referrals that sits here. And those two things are just like working separately. We're seeing a number of organizations, I'm not going to sort of name names right now, move that under one person or one team. And those organizations are starting to do what I'm describing, which can really have an impact on diversity, because you start sharing content and jobs together. So I suppose like anybody looking to move the needle on diversity with referrals should be thinking about how you don't necessarily need to merge those teams immediately, but how you can get those teams to talk to each other to make sure it's a combined effort.
Sorry for the background noise, folks. I'm actually in Dubai, right? And there's so many Maseratis here, it's ridiculous. So it sounds like an F1 track sometimes outside this sort of the hotel room. So I'm having to mute off. Dorothy, you say some amazing things here. I'm very tempted to suggest you come on and join us on screen. I'd love let me know if you're up for that. We're actually on the Crowdcast. Dorothy's watching this on LinkedIn, but if you want to hop onto the Crowdcast, let me know. We might want to bring you on. Coming up with some really good observations and commentary. Okay, there's some other things I want to deal with, but I maybe want to bring on our guests first before we do that, or maybe we need to run through the data first, then we bring on the guests, and then everyone else who's commented. This is Simon, this is Ken, this is all those other folks that have dropped in with some great comments. We'll maybe deal with them as a Q&A towards the end. So, right, is there data? Like, obviously, folks, me and Sam have not actually organized this whatsoever, so I have no idea what he's on about. But yeah, you're going to do something, aren't
you? Yeah, cool. Okay, so I'll give you an example of one of the clients we work with where actually, they bought our platform to support ED&I hiring. So they bought a referral platform to support ED&I hiring. That was their starting point. So Great Western Railway, a lot of people on this call might be familiar with them. For those not in the UK, it's a big train operator here. They historically have really struggled to get female applications in the engineering side of their business. Really, they've tried loads of different things. It's predominantly male applications, always has been. And they've tried previous campaigns, by the way. I was delving into the data with them a little bit. So previously, they were struggling. I think like what the last campaign that they ran was like 7% female applications. Maybe one got like around the 10% mark. What they wanted to do is, so they have a number of employee resource groups, diversity groups within the organization, one being called Women in Engineering. They were like, can we run a campaign with our employee resource group to see if we can drive more female applications for this area of the business? This is a good example of linking content to jobs. So our view was like, if we just get people to share jobs, you've got this reputation, it's not going to be persuasive enough. So they produced some really cool content. It was a sort of a junior female train driver talking about her journey, a video, her journey to become a train driver. Another piece of content was a little like interview of a more senior female driver talking about how she mentored that female driver early on in her career. But getting views, impressions, likes, that wasn't their objective here. So they needed to link this content to jobs. So they were sharing content linked to specific opportunities in this area of the business. This was a 3-week campaign. Everybody really engaged with it. Lots of content sharing within the ERG, which I hasten to add, by the way, this is an ERG that's men and women. So this isn't just women sharing. Led to 319 content shares, well over 3,000 views. But the most interesting part of this was, of the 101 applications, 27% were female. So they've gone from the 7% mark that I spoke about to 27%, which just shows you, actually, when you start looking at referrals strategically, when you tie content to jobs and when you work with your internal diversity groups, actually, they can be really effective in diversifying your workforce and addressing areas where you're not getting diversity. So I think it's a really interesting use case. I hasten to add, if you don't have employee resource groups or diversity groups, we're seeing other companies take the same approach, but going broader. So rather than it just being restricted to an employee resource group, asking everybody to sort of share this content around what it's like to, for example, be a female train driver and get everybody sharing that. So yeah, hopefully that helps as an example of how you can use it strategically.
Very, very interesting. I think the nuance is what I'm getting out of here. So ERPs, employee referral programs, might seem as if they're, a one size fits all technique. Here's the referral scheme. It's 5K per successful hire. Off you go. And if you leave it at that, then yeah, you may not contribute to diversification of your workforce. You may homogenize your workforce. Actually, you don't know. You've just simply lost control over it, and you'll just grow without sort of the diversity lens on this. But if you do want to diversify your workforce, and there's many reasons why you want to do this, I appreciate your comment, by the way, Ken. Just to address this real quick, I think that it's extremely. You can view sort of ERPs as a kind of you can view the topic as in a negative light, in the sense that we're trying to reduce white male applicants, for instance. And I don't think that's a real fair understanding of what we're talking about here. The main issue we're trying to do is to increase the numbers of underrepresented applicants to the talent pipeline, where we feel that there's an underrepresentation. So it's not a case that we want to reduce applicant flow of any demographic. We want to increase applicant flow overall, but there's certain demographics where the flow rate is simply lower, and we want to try and address that. And we want to do this, by the way, for a number of reasons. Firstly, we want to diversify the workforce for lots of reasons. We think that diversity will give us more flexibility, more nuance, more understanding. For dealing with general public as a business, typically it's a good idea to have an organization that reflects the audience you're trying to sell to. Secondly, there is a talent a talent pipeline problem. We know the working age demographic, for instance, in the UK, we've already hit the peak. I think it was 2 years or so ago, actually, where we hit the peak number of people in the UK that are actually of working age, and we're going to keep going down. So we have to diversify simply because there's groups and populations that are currently underrepresented in the workforce. So if we want to keep going at a hiring rate, then we need to do these things. So yeah, I hope that hopefully that addresses some of the points they sort of in the LinkedIn. But anyway, let's move forward. We'll bring on some colleagues and friends and stuff like this that might want to contribute. By the way, I'm going to try and say, if you want to come on, why don't you just is there a way in which I can do this? All right, this is high risk, Sam. Okay, I'm going to do it. Oh, hello. There we go.
It's a high risk.
Anything can happen now.
Yeah.
The high risk is okay. There's a toggle which says open stage, and I'll just read what this says: is guests are allowed freely to walk onto stage.
Have you ever done this before? First time?
No. So basically, folks, if you want to come on stage, you can just walk on. So crack on. Let's make this an open forum.
We've got Akbar and Dane here as well, haven't we?
There is. I'm gonna try and find Akbar first. Certainly he's here. Dane's walked on. Dane has actually walked on. The first guy that's actually walked on without invite is Dane Fox. Amazing stuff.
He was invited. Let's make this an open We've got Akbar and Dane here as well, haven't we?
Oh, hang on. I'm gonna have to mute Dane. Dane, I think, do you have any headphones by any chance? Because we can hear our own audios through your speakers. If you do have them, take a moment and stick them on. Where's Akbar, man? I don't know where Akbar is, but he can walk on as well. Yeah, he's done that. He's walked on. Brilliant. Hey, Akbar, you're the second guy that's just literally walked onto a Brain Food Live without invitation. Crazy stuff. This may continue to happen, by the way. We're almost like at a bar, and then people can just come up and say hello. I think that's totally fine. Be prepared for anything, okay? It's all good. Exactly the posture, Akbar. I love it. Why don't we quickly introduce ourselves? Akbar, can you quickly say who you are, what it is you do, mate?
Yeah, so I'm founder of Marusi, which is a startup consultancy around HR and recruitment specifically for startups. And I'm co-founder of the Black Recruiter Network, one of the largest communities of people of color in talents and people.
I believe it is the largest, Akbar. Don't be shy. How many people have you got in network, mate?
We've just passed 2,000 plus members, and that's across the UK, US, EMEA, Africa. So yeah, pretty global.
That's fantastic, mate. And by the way, it is a case that in TA and in recruiting, it is pretty non-diverse. It's one of the least diverse sort of from an ethnicity point of view, I believe, as a segment that I've seen. That's just the reality of it. It's also quite female skewed also. So, we're not particularly diverse at all as a function. So when you talk about actually Akbar, just lean on this as a curiosity, but as a black male TA, I think that's probably one of the rarest combos.
There are some of us. So my co-founder, Ibrahim Thomas, but it is very funny when you build a community, you realize, oh my God, I know the 300 of us that exist globally, but we're growing, we're changing. Weirdly enough, on the agency side, it changes actually. And especially with graduate recruitment for recruitment consultancies at large firms, it's pretty fair actually in terms of people who look like me.
And given the fact most people in TA are pipeline through agency side, that's very promising because we can imagine that that's going to be basically a pipeline into TA at some point. Okay, great. Let's move on to Dean real quick. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Hello, I am Mr. Fox. I've been in recruitment now for just over 10 years in so many different cool organizations. I am one of the few neurodiverse TA leaders in the space as well. So I come with some very different ideas and ways of working.
Fantastic to have you on here, Dean. And I've just double shared you on the chat. This is how enthusiastic I am that people connect with you. You've got 2 options and 2 links to choose from. Okay, let's talk about this topic: diversifying the talent pipeline using sort of employee referral schemes. What's generally been a technique that seems to have worked? Akbar, we've got a comment on LinkedIn. Simon, I think he's mentioned paying kind of a differentiated bonus to a demographic that you want to try and promote first. What's your approach on this? Just to speak in common language, this may be to say, hey, folks, we're looking for candidates, but if you introduce candidates of this demographic, we're going to give you more of the referral bonus than we would do on someone else. What's your opinion on that technique, Akbar?
So me and Sam, we've worked together, and when we rolled it at a company that I was at, we actually asked our staff what did they want as a reward, and we saw actually the people chose non-monetary things, super creative things, and it was never the number. It was the space that we did the referral. So we decided to collect people together. Sam and the team calling it a jam, where it was actually let's focus on sharing connections there and then, timing it earlier in the candidate journey as part of the onboarding process, for example, make that an event. So I'd say don't rush for that 2-tiered monetary benefit unless the staff say, actually, I would be more likely to. And then it starts getting a little bit into the weeds of, okay, are you able to anonymize and aggregate the referee and referrer when they land in your pipeline? Because if you're adding, it's like it's the classic sales technique. People will always move in terms of how they are remunerated to. So if you are adding a more higher stakes number to it, you might get bad behavior, you might get pipelines getting padded, and you might have people doing nudge winks. If it's, so I was just consulted for a fintech business. They decided to now do 10K for engineering hires just generally, and kept the 1K for the commercial roles. And I was like, are you sure about this? And you're only offering it to engineers who refer engineers? Oof, that's a lot of energy that you're going to be putting into policing something that's meant to be good vibes and fun.
Really, really interesting point. So firstly, the monetary commitment is the standard. I think most people just think, let's just throw some money at this. But it may not be the big motivator. It may not be the optimal motivator. So have a chat with your employees about this before you go and design anything. You should do that anyway, just as a classic change management approach. So if you're introducing a referral scheme where previously there has been none, you want people to be active and engaged in it, then actually speaking to them about what it is that they are most motivated by is one of the ways in which you do activation. So it's best practice anyway. Sam, you want to say something? Just go ahead.
Very quickly on this, because I used to spend a long time trying to work out that perfect reward, and you'd run surveys and you'd try and what do employees want the most? The reality is companies are different, but employees within companies are different. So this idea that you're going to find that perfect reward or those perfect 3 rewards is just not realistic. What you can do, a lot of companies will have some sort of reward shop already. Giving people optionality is probably being my biggest learning. People want different things. So letting them go and pick what they want, whatever your reward system is, whether you reward shares, views, applications, interviews, and hires, Akbar makes a really salient point. Cash isn't always king. Let them pick what they want, because you'll really struggle to try and find what that perfect reward is.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Then again, money is important. We shouldn't sort of take the last couple of minutes of chat to kind of as if it's an attempt to kind of be a cheapskate when it comes down to this. I've seen sort of scenarios where companies have been reluctant to pay or to return the reward. That's one of the most destructive things you can do. Or they argue the toss, in the same way. They say, actually, we spoke to this candidate, 2 weeks or so ago. He's already in pipeline. We're gonna not give you the referral scheme, even though you might have made a decisive contribution to get this person activated into the flow. All of those things are negative. So don't use what we've just said as an attempt to cheapskate your way out of it. Sam, again, you want to say something? Just go ahead.
Well, very quickly, like when you're doing these reward shop options, a lot of the time reward shops now will have like a cash option. So for somebody, cash is king. They can still choose that. But it's about everybody else who might be like, so for example, a lot of them will have like charity options. So like some people will be motivated by potentially giving that money to charity or something else. So it's just giving that optionality. But you're exactly right. Still keep cash on the table.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, where are we with next question? Next question, Dean, let's go to you on this. We're talking about diversity. There's some obvious diversities, right? Should we say visible diversities? Classically ethnicity, classically gender. I guess we can also, I mean, even age is not that visible, really, because we can't really clearly define people very accurately in terms of age. I, for instance, look significantly, in my 20s. Even
babyface song.
Mate, the reality is this camera has been heavily modified and it no longer shows reality. So this is the reason why you can't see all the wrinkles in my face. But no, so but there's other kinds of diversity, right? So how do we go about like encouraging diversity of other types? Neurodiversity is a classic one. So have you even encountered something that does this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so like especially people with neurodiversity can suffer with anxiety. If they don't really understand something and it's not really their passion, they're not really going to focus on it, are they? So with platforms similar to Real-Links, it's really easy to use. It's a points-based system, and you can really encourage a certain demographic of people, not just people with neurodiversity, but let's stay on that line, to be incentivized by points that they can spend on things that aren't just cash. It might be charity, it might be something else.
Can I just jump in? I saw a great question from Stephen on Crowdcast. So, how about this? Any referral made within the company is guaranteed an interview. Sam and anyone on the chat, how do you do the actual reward? Is it at placements? Is it at interview? Is it at introduction? What are some people's thoughts around that?
So, to answer Stephen's question, I would really strongly advise that you don't guarantee an interview for a referral. I think that that's just unfair on everybody else in the equation, and they should be interviewed to the extent that their application is as good as anybody else you're considering for an interview. But one thing I would say is, and it comes back to the distinction between an introduction and a recommendation. What some of our clients will do, say often companies will have an SLA on response times when it comes to referrals. They won't I've never seen a company we work with anyway say you're going to guarantee an interview for a referral. But I have seen a number of cases where if it's a referral, you respond, say, within 2 days. But that I think makes sense because you want employees engaged and you need to sort of convince them that you're going to give their candidate a good experience. But it's important to only do that to the extent that it's a recommendation, because when you're talking social introductions, if you start applying that logic, recruiters are very quickly going to become overwhelmed because suddenly they've got a SLA to apply to lots and lots of candidates coming through that stream. So I think it is important to look at how you can treat them differently, but I wouldn't go as far as an interview. I would say think about SLAs and response times, and definitely make a distinction between a recommendation and an introduction. From a points perspective, to loop back to your question, Abba, I think this is an example. A lot of our clients, most of our clients would give them a share, view, application, interview, and hire. And some of our clients will also give different points depending on whether it's a recommendation application as opposed to an introduction application. So it gives you the flexibility. It's customizable, so it will vary depending on the company and what they want to achieve.
Okay, really, really important. It brings us back to that distinction right at the beginning of the show. It actually then opens up the opportunities, because if you didn't make that distinction, you make yourself vulnerable to I don't want to use the word abuse because it seems too strong, but let's say behavior that is is going to cause problems for the recruiting team. So, for instance, if you just said, "Hey, introduction, referrals is all the same thing," you might get like super active people that just pumping people into the pipeline. And then if you've made some sort of guarantee off the cuff to say, "Yeah, we're going to interview everybody," guess what? Everyone's going to just be crashed into loads of interviews to irrelevant candidates. Very quickly, you're going to have a riot on your hands. Forget about the end of the ERP plan. There's going to be industrial action there. That's strike worthy. Yes, it stops objectively.
On the flip side with that, though, if you are putting people forward that you think are good, then you've done your bit. You've put these people forward, and if that recommendation, which is the key umbrella term, and they get seen, then they should be rewarded for that. So for the introduction, for the offer, it's up to you as the business to then close that person or select that person.
Absolutely. And I think most companies would do that. I think it's just making sure that you're not applying like an SLA logic to an introduction and suddenly being like, oh my gosh, this is too much for my team.
Yeah. And the introductions, I think, are fair as well, because then the referee can basically moderate that. They can actually say whether it's a recommendation or it's an intro, because their reputation is also on the line. There's a lot of social capital involved when it comes down to making referrals, on both sides. So if you're referring a candidate, you don't want to refer bad candidates in, because you're going to obviously look like a bad a bad employee, so to say. You don't want to bring that rep in, and at the same time, you also don't want to subject your friends to bad sort of candidate experience. So to your point, Dean, you don't want to kind of introduce people to a company and then have them sit around for weeks on end and not get feedback and all this stuff. So I am a believer that maybe that we should differentiate the candidate experience for referred candidates, let's say. But yeah, I don't think they go through the same pipe though, Akbar, because we have to recognize that the candidate, that there's an additional actor involved. So there's a referee involved, right? And there's a social relationship there. And it's like, okay, is there a way in which we can sort of give a bit more white glove, a bit more concierge for a referred candidate? But you don't like that. So you know more about this than me. So tell me where this is wrong.
So that's where I think the crack is open in terms of cognitive bias and where it can make an employee program less diverse. Because there's a certain level of clout and career comfort that means that I can, with my chest, to my HR team go, this is a good guy, because I've got history. In those type of senior positions and positions of authority are usually people who are going to usually have items of characteristics that are less diverse. Then also, if we're saying, okay, let's judge everyone on a structured interview process, points-based system, a rubric system, we're letting, who was the referee? That could, Jeff, who's a marketing manager, he's got respect in the business. His referral should be the same as the first person who just started a bit earlier. So I would say having a two-tier process, it muddies the assessment criteria, because all you're asking is at the top of the funnel, get me more people, and the process that we are using to judge across all roles should be the same.
I completely agree with that. And I think the only distinction you'd make is just giving the employees some comfort to say, if you make a referral, we're going to see them within a certain amount of days. And I think that's a very reasonable thing to do. But otherwise, I think that like everybody should be treated the same way. And I think that's where, if as soon as you start doing that differently, that's where referrals get a bad name. So
I'm not. You guys have basically made a more logical argument than I can't even refute it. So I'm not going to try, but I'm still wedded to the idea that you should kind of give some concierge to it. Let's ask the audience on this, folks. Where do you stand on the idea of how you treat candidates that are referred candidates? Do they go front of the door, should we say, as any other candidate? Let's have a standardized system. That's the fairest way to do it. Or do we have a parallel process to differentiate the experience to say, you know what, we recognize that you've been recommended in. We're going to, not necessarily give you bonus points or give you kind of extra cred, but we're going to treat you slightly differently rather than make you, join the line. I appreciate this is all cute. I'm thinking nightclubs for some reason, which is, of course, the least inclusive way to get into a nightclub. It's beefcake saying yes, no, maybe based on complete random arbitrary criteria. But you know, hey, my mate can get in. I kind of like that. Anyway, all right, I'm obviously wrong, but you know what? Let me know in the comments what you think. Before we get into this, by the way, I can see we're running away with this time already. We also want to make sure that this conversation does not stop, even though we have to come off air. So let's take this opportunity to connect with as many people as we can that care about this topic of diversifying the pipeline, talent pipeline with employee referrals. The way we do that is to get your LinkedIn URL and share it in the chat stream if you're watching this on Crowdcast, and then connect with everyone else who's done the same. And if you're watching this on any of the LinkedIns that are out there, then simply grab your URL, stick it in the comment thread there, and then connect with everyone who's done the same there. Worst case scenario, you walk away with 20, 30, 50 new connections that care about this topic. Go ahead and talk about it offline if you so wish with those folks. Okay, Sam, you want to say something?
One very, very quick point that I think is actually worth mentioning related to this, because rewards and diversity is, if I go back to that GWR campaign I was talking about at the beginning, what a lot of our clients, so Akbar is describing sort of a points-based system. Now, what a lot of our clients have moved towards is like collective charity goals. So the goal of this particular campaign is to plant X number of trees, for example, and we work together towards that. And we're seeing more and more companies do that, tied to the values. The reason I mention it is, I should have said this earlier, when Great Western Railway ran that campaign to try and get more female drivers, the collective charity goal they had was to raise a certain amount of money for Women's Aid. So what they did is they tied the charity goal to the campaign, and everybody really bought into that. So I saw a sort of point earlier on in the chat around sort of, you know, rewards aren't the primary motivator. And I don't think they are, but I do think they are quite an important secondary motivator. And when you bring and when you tie the values of your campaign to your reward, it can be exceptionally powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer that rewards should be there, simply because, you know, it's the easiest way to create a bit of a splash of an ERP sometimes. And there's ways in which you can moderate the cost. I mean, I'm a fan of, again, I think I'm a marginal case here, but I like the idea of having like a tranche referral scheme, you know, where you can say, you know, if the person makes first interview that you've referred in, great, you can give a little bit of a portion of the reward there. If they've made it to offer stage, you can get a reward there. If they've made it, you know, past probation, there's a reward there. And that can make it a little bit easier, I think. It's a bit more complicated to implement, but ultimately it might mean that you are kind of lowering the risk, so to say, because oftentimes there's going to be cynics that say, oh, we've got a 10, in Akbar's case, 10K sort of referral scheme for a successful hire. Great. Well, if that person like is a bust and gets fired in 2 weeks, did you claw that back from someone? You know, suddenly that's a very ugly experience. So yeah, how do you deal with this? So go ahead, Dean, just go ahead.
Got a really key important point to make. So like, referrals are an incredible outlet to open up opportunities for those that might not have seen them. So the topic of this call, which is what prompts me to be on here, is diversifying your talent pipeline. Okay, so if I can leave everyone here on this call today with one key message: if you cater for the minority, you cater for all.
What do you mean by this, Dean? Do you mean, this is interesting on targeting, right? So this moves us on to a topic we haven't discussed yet, which is how specific should we be in targeting underrepresented groups? And this is probably where we start wandering into territory which makes people a bit uncomfortable. But it should be, for instance, specifically say, you know what, we're going to just isolate the referral campaign to this demographic for the time being, because we particularly want to get involved with this group of people. What are our thoughts on that? Is that good policy? Have you seen it work? Go ahead, Akbar.
Yeah, so a great company called Climate X. They do the actuarial science for climate risk, and it's packaged up, and their data is sold to some of the biggest banks and underwriters in the world. Lucky the CEO, they looked at their space and actually realized that they lacked in certain things according to the Quality Act 2010, and said, okay, for roles, for the first 2 weeks when we open a role, we're going to do very deliberate outreach to communities. We're going to have an event. It's going to be a drinks mixer where people find out about the business. All applications are welcome. But they said the turnaround time for a decision was going to be quicker for people who came from groups that they were struggling to initially hire for. You weren't guaranteed an interview, you weren't guaranteed a job, but they said initially we want to get some sort of traction regarding some of the characteristics of the Qualities Act. They did that amazingly well, and they wrapped it around a referral scheme. So it can happen if you are deliberate, fair, and you understand the difference between positive discrimination and positive action. I think Climate X did a very good job around that.
That's brilliant, Akbar. Did I just accidentally delete Dean and Sam?
They're gone. They're gone.
That might have happened, guys. Sorry. What happened? I clicked on something and they both disappeared. Oh no, it's all going wrong. Akbar, you got sent the stage, mate. You might have to give a song and dance routine. But yeah, listen. I mean, that's an interesting topic because would it be fair to say we want to keep that as an impermanent state? Like it should that be a campaign, for instance, where you say, you know what, we want to make a difference in this particular thing. We want to get the car rolling, so to say. But we're not comfortable with this being a permanent state, because then we might be making a kind of very strong comment that we particularly value one demographic ahead of another.
So you had a really good poll a couple of weeks ago, which was about do you have a program, but is it a little bit dead? Or is it kind of something that is in an email somewhere when they're onboarded? Using a tool like this that is reactive across time of the year, something happening in your business, or a particular, for example, it's Black History Month, or is it something happening another time of the year? Move it around according to what's happening in the world and your needs. So yes, keep it fresh. And also, if you're tying it to content, so it's very boring to see your feed, which is like, my job is to have jobs. No one's going to click on my profile and go, oh, well done, sir, you have jobs. So if you're wrapping interesting content around a timely issue, even more the better for the successful referral campaign.
Yeah, very, very interesting. What are your thoughts, just to make it a little bit more difficult and challenging? There have been some referrals, not even referrals, so this goes beyond referrals, but where we have limited rights to apply to a job based on your demographic background. And on one hand, we've seen these examples lauded as a great way to get underrepresented groups into pipeline, the purpose of what we're trying to do. But then we had some very strong reactions from other people saying, look, that's just a blatant piece of discrimination, because there's other people that really want to need those jobs also, but they're not able to apply. So there was a Dutch university, I think, basically had a job out there. I put it on Brain Food a couple of weeks, some time ago, where they said on the advert, for instance, or this is only open for, I forget what the demographic was, but it was basically only open for a certain type of person. And yeah, we had both positive and negative sort of backlash from that. What are your thoughts on this? Is there a straightforward answer, Akbar?
Yes, there is the straight legal answer between positive discrimination and positive action. In that case, there is, you can't say only these people can apply. That is positive discrimination. Positive action would be, here is why this is a great space for that type of person that you might not have heard about. And then, for that case, then we would actively encourage you to apply. You can do the latter, but you can't do the former in terms of saying, I won't see. There are some times where that changes in terms of formal affirmative action legislation. We've seen it be built up and be slightly torn down in the US, for example. So it's very much locked into the nuance of the legalities of your country. But then on how does it make people feel? No one on both sides of that, no one wants to feel like they only got the interview because they were from that demographic, if there was that underrepresented person. But also at the same time, rightly so, people were like, hey, I'm just as good, and just because I don't have one of those, why should I not be considered? The whole point of increasing, I love your point there, increasing equity means that sometimes you need to do a little bit harder for a community that is underrepresented, but it's more applications generally, not less of those people, quote unquote.
Yeah, really good, Akbar. And I actually forgot that probably the main point is obviously legislative differences in those jurisdictions. So this example I quote was in the Netherlands. And I do remember the people who were most irate about it were actually from the US, where I think it's more clear you can't make these types of distinctions. So I guess the ethics of it or the politics of it are going to align a little bit more with your current legislative environment. So, you know, one of the roles that you in TA or HR need to have is obviously be very fluid with what those rules are in your jurisdiction, which also means, in fact, that may have an implication for the geographical range of your scheme. So you know what I mean? If you're hiring global, if you're saying, hey, we're going to recruit globally, be aware that the campaign you're launching may be in or out of compliance according to different sort of locations where people might be applying from, I guess. So there's some complexity there to kind of wrestle around. Yeah, very, very interesting. Okay, cool. I'm struggling to get Dean and Sam back on, so I'm hereby giving up, Akbar. It's just me and you going to ride this into the sunset.
Can you hear me? Well, I just hit him.
I think Dean's here, but I can't see him.
Here.
I don't know why. I don't know. I don't know what to do, Dean. It's like you're disembodied
Akbar's
Dean now.
smashing it. Me and Sam, we're just watching the Akbar show.
Yeah, it's like all right. I think Sam is here as well, but okay, no worries. Let's just keep rolling as we are, Akbar, because we've only got 2 minutes left anyway. I wanted to maybe Sam's back.
Hey,
Sam, stop pressing buttons, mate. Just leave it as is, hands free, and then we're going to be all right. Yeah, so let's leave it. Dean, you can also contribute to this if you're still on the call. Let's do a quick round robin. As a bit of advice for to try to address this topic. So we've got a bunch of people, let's say, in the audience that are thinking, you know what, number one, we want to diversify our pipeline. Number two, we're a little bit sort of not sure about whether the ERP can play a role in this. What's your best advice for them to actually, dovetail those two things and make them work for each other? Akbar, do you want to go ahead with this first?
Advice. I would say make it low stakes for the referrer. If you can articulate that, we just want you to highlight somebody that we might want to hire, as opposed to be like, only hire your A player from the last company that you worked at, because that's messed up in those different ways. So make it low stakes, try and make it fun. And try and realize that this is part of a larger piece. This is only one channel that's going to help you hire better.
Yeah, I love it. I love the fact the fun aspect. You mentioned that a couple of times. I probably should have emphasized it more, Akbar. ERPs work best when everyone's doing it as a plus, like a high. It's a cool company thing to get involved in, where people get browbeaten into doing it and thinking it's like, oh my God, it's another bit of admin. Why is HR not doing their job? That when it gets to that stage, you know what? Pause the campaign, revise it, and rebrand it. You got to relaunch that. It's already dead in the water. You've got to keep that as a positive thing that everyone enjoys to do. Okay, Dane, you're back with us. What's your bit of advice, mate, to people watching this that want to implement or improve their current pipeline with regards to diversity?
Get yourself some diverse ambassadors. Like tap into your D&I forums as well.
Staying here.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Don't know.
Yes, so good.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, honestly, tap into your D&I. I hate to use that word because everyone's diverse, but tap into your D&I forums if you have them, and just find out how they would do it, what would work best for them. We alluded to that earlier on in the conversation, and then hone in onto that. You can do a bit of a you said, we did, and always reflect and revise on that because times change.
Yeah, very, very good. Thank you, Dean. Sam, last word to you, or a bit of advice, mate. Don't say you use real links. I mean,
thanks for saying it for me.
It's a very good platform.
No, I think a few things. Firstly, I think the convergence of advocacy and referrals. I think really think about any content that you have that you can connect with those jobs when you're sharing it. It's going to be much more persuasive than just sharing a job description. And really think about running targeted campaigns around that, potentially starting with employee resource groups, but then expanding out beyond that. You know, we're seeing the results I spoke about with GWR across lots of different companies, different employee resource groups, and it can really start to move the needle for you.
Yeah, very, very good. Great stuff. I can see Dane's already dropped from the call, so let's remove Dane from it. Oh, he's back, but he was back just as I was hovered over the remove bar, and I had to just press the remove button. So sorry, Dane, he's out. You know when you've made a decision to remove, and he just popped back in just to get that last slap down. Sorry, mate. But thanks for coming in. Great to have you, Dean. Akbar, we'll have to remove you same way, mate. Great to see you, man. We'll catch up soon. Thanks for joining the call with your wonderful insights. And Sam, thanks for joining and helping with the call, mate. Really good insight. Keep pumping stuff out. I mean, you should produce more data on this, because there's one thing we can do to talk webinars and do the storytelling. But I think also some data would be really powerful. So see if we can get some of the crew in to crack something out that might be shareable in a wider way.
We're working on a paper at the moment, so it's coming.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Okay, Sam, listen, that's about it. Thanks for coming on screen, mate. We'll catch you soon. Yeah, we'll let you go now, man.
Nice one. Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
I don't actually know how to remove you, so you have to just get rid.
Okay.
It's the controls have all gone skew with here. I don't get it. But anyway, folks, I hope you've enjoyed the show. That is it. We're back obviously on normal time. I'll be back next week. By the way, I need to show you something because the sun has just gone down, and I'm just about to step out to grab some of the beautiful skyline. I'm in Dubai, by the way, right now. Just my last couple of days. Just check out the scenery here. Isn't this incredible? I haven't actually spent a huge amount of time in this city before now, but I've had the good chance to be here for a couple of days, and it's been fantastic just to chill out and to see some of these scenes. I will be back in the UK on Sunday, though, and I'll be there for a week, so we're back to normal programming for next week. We're going to be talking about, I haven't even set up the event yet, but we're going to be talking about, we're going to start a review 2024 series. We're going to come into November. All of November is going to be reviewing the year that's just sort of coming to an end. The first episode in that series is going to be staffing agencies in the UK. What is the state of the staffing agency market in 2024? How has that been? Who's doing well? Who is having challenges? What do we anticipate going forward in the future? Neil Carberry of the Recruitment and Employers Confederation is joining us. Simon Bliss of the Team Network's joining us as well. Got a bunch of other cool agency owners and networkers in there as well. It's going to give us a good overview, the start of a mini series that's going to take us into the new year, where we're going to look back and review 2024. Make sure you follow the channel. That is the best place to get kind of updated on what we're going to be doing here. And yeah, thanks for watching. Have a good weekend. I'll see you next week.